starting with a sort of an odd question, and we'll get back to the more obvious things, I guess. But I wanted to ask you about the movie within the movie, the sci-fi film that these actresses are working in. What are you doing an homage to anything in particular with that?
I love sci-fi, and I love color, and I had this idea for this sci-fi universe called Candy Floss, which is going to become its own movie in a couple of years. So yeah, it's a good idea. I see. I wanted the film to be everything. So it had to both be science fiction and horror and melodrama and action and you know, sexy stuff and violence and you know, opera. It had to have consume everything in one.
Are you keeping the same cast when you turn it into a film?
We're negotiating.
We just heard the amazing score where the credits talk about Pino Donaggio, who you brought out of retirement. He did the score for Carrie, Lola, a ton of other films. Talk about why he was the right choice for Predator.
So Pino Donaggio is one of the great cinema composers from Italy. And when I was making the film, it was the first time I made a movie not knowing what the sound was going to be. I didn't have the music in my mind. And maybe that was a good thing because I realized, so I shoot in chronologically order. So as I was standing suddenly on this silver set with plastic around me for like $5, I came to the conclusion, well, I always wanted to make an opera, and this is as close as I'll ever get to it because everything is fake, and it had to be fake. So I was like, I'm going to make it an opera. And to do that, you need opera music, but also a film composer that knows how to work both worlds. So you go to Italy, because it's opera. The problem was in Italy, all the composers were dead, except Pino Donaggio, who I had to Google, was alive, and he was in his mid-80s. Now, ironically, I've been using Pino's music for the last 20 years. It's just reference music, both on developing or even when I'm shooting, playing his music was always very inspiring. And obviously his work with Brian Palmer and Dario Argento and many others are part of our pop culture. So I reached out to him, lived in Venice, very Italian, hair slicked back, big sunglasses, very chilled, didn't speak a word of English, and I asked him if he wanted to make an opera, and he said, sure. You know, he was up for it. I said, well, okay, but you know, you're in the mid-80s, you're probably gonna die soon, so make it your regular. And he laughed, and he thought that was funny, so I knew we could work together. And but I was in a bit of a gamble, so I don't know if there's any film directors here or filmmakers, but I like the act of complete failure unless you have one option. So it's a bit like going in on a casino and betting your chip on one. Because for me, creativity, is most exhilarating when you can lose everything. You know, there's this great scene Once Upon a Time in the West where Henry Fonda shoots a man who has a belt and a suspenders on his pants. He says, never trust a man who doesn't trust his own pants. And that's safety and creativity. You have to be able to, in a situation, lose everything because then it has to work. There's no option for not doing it. And in this situation, I had kind of painted myself into a corner because in opera you make the music first, but here was the last part. It was the last piece of the puzzle. So I had made, you know, a card house. I built the veins. There was a heart, but there was no blood. So I said to Pino, just so you know, I'm betting on you because I have no other options. And if this fails, this movie's going to be the worst film ever made. So it's on you, pal. And I think he very much achieved it. I hope he did the same thing, but yeah.
I wonder if he's gonna do a couple more scores just to prove you wrong.
Well, he's so amazing because now he's working on a new Brian Palmer movie. So he's back. So is Brian.
Resurrection.
Yeah.
Sort of like your own. I wonder if you could talk a little bit. I mean, I know maybe people have heard, that you had a sort of health scare and you came back, and that brought you back to cinema in a way.
Well, I didn't have a health scare, I died. I was dead for 25 minutes. And that does things to you. So before I died, I had come, I don't know, are there any artists here also, but you get to a certain point in everything you do where you run out of juice. And in my situation, that's what happened. I've always, in my opinion, worked from the notion that it's only once. So you create something only once to create something new again only once. It's a bit like cocaine. The first line, you spend the rest of your life chasing it. We are in Hollywood, so. But that's the addiction you get. You get hooked on the dopamine. And I ran out of juice. I tripped into streaming, which was exciting because they pay you a lot of dough, and it's amazing canvas of length, but it wasn't what I was looking for. And then I began to work in fine arts, and then I died. And after 25 minutes, I was brought back, which is crazy. It's all black, there's nothing there, so don't like live your life now. It ain't gonna happen afterwards. So when I came back, I realized that I'd been given a gift, or at least that's how I chose to look at it. Because I could start over. And I was still young enough to have another 25 years left of my life to be active. And that does something to you, your mind, and especially time, and how you use your time, how you take time, and how you give time. And the reason why I wanted to go back and make movies was not so much for the movies themselves, because there are movies everywhere and they're in all formats. But I think for my kids, I think the world is becoming unhealthy by all the separation and all the dividing and all this living in a digital mirror. Because if we don't live together, we will die. So cinema is one of the most effective places for people to get together and experience together from all different kinds of forms. So to me, it was about how to make something that would bring people together. And I make a certain kind of film, which, you may or may not like, but the point is that it's an experience, and that's what creativity is. When the politicians have stolen all your money and built all the wars, I'm not mentioning any names, art is what brings you together. Creativity is what combines us. And that's, I think, more what I was moving towards than anything else.
I really talked about this in relation to the algorithm and sort of how our lives have been kind of really ruled by social media and how we interact with each other online. Can you talk about how that influenced this film?
Well, I have a lot of opinions about the algorithm. It's the enemy of creativity, in my opinion. But I'm fascinated by the idea of scrolling. I'm fascinated by social media in general because I think it does have pushed the boundaries of how we tell stories. Same thing with gaming, and technology has opened up many new ways to understand narrative. And that's the most important thing. You always have to push the boundaries. You always have to go further. Because if you don't, it gets stale. And stale in creativity is death. So for me, when I first came to America, I was 8 years old. I was speaking a word of English. And what changed my life was television. The idea that I could click channels and see multiple experiences that I didn't even connect, but the dopamine was incredibly effective. It was like getting me high as a kite. The idea of telling stories in this format now, in a movie, I found very interesting. Like almost like the film dictated its own desires. You see, most entertainment, it's my Legos because of my Asperger, but so are lines, of information. It's like a piece of paper with lines that informs you, gives you information, takes information, surprises the information. It's like coding. And it's very easy to manipulate, it's very easy to manufacture, very easy to build a kind of bakery. It's like a recipe. But what's interesting about fairy tales, which I began to be very interested in, is that they're as thin as a piece of paper on the surface, because it's all the stories are so simplistic. But when you turn the paper, the nuances behind the stories are far more complex, which is why we're always reading fairy tales again and again and again from generation to generation, because it's all about interpretation. And interpretation has no boundaries, it's bottomless. And that's where creativity becomes an experience, because you're no longer just getting information, you're getting codes of signals, you're getting symbols. And all those elements is what travels with you for the rest of your life, because they affect you in a different way, because they're subliminal in a certain way. And they divide and they kind of mutate together with your subconscious. And that is when I think creativity becomes the most powerful weapon in the world.
Your films, I mean, this one and several of your films are very much explosions of color. Can you talk about your use of color and how you create the bisexual item that people love?
Yeah, bisexual lighting. Well, lighting is asexual. It's lighting is fetishization of objects, essentially. And I love to fetishize, obviously, both the female and the male bodies. It's a form of fantasy, and I'm colorblind, which means that there are certain things I can't see, but I can feel them, which means I can feel color. But in order to feel them, I have to see them first. But I don't know how you mix colors to get a third color. So the camera team and the post team have to work while in preparation to show me what my options are if I paint this with that and I could get this. And it goes a lot against their logics, because you can't do this, you can't do that to get this. But to me, that's only how I can see it. So in a way, it forces everyone else to be colorblind. So it's a very, for me, color is something that is very sensitive.
We talked about Pino, but also, going back to Italy, I guess Giallo is clearly an influence, and here the over-the-top violence of Giallo films. Talk about why is that something that sort of interests you to include in this one?
Well, I love extremeness, and Italians are extreme, and their culture is extreme. It's always heightened, and I like anything that is perverse. That came off weird.
Is your fascination with the perverse part of how you cast people in this? You asked them interesting question.
Yeah, So we cast it for a year, and I couldn't find the one that was going to play the Elle character, who's named Elle Isabel Fanning. I didn't have anyone that was the girl. And after a year, it was getting quite desperate, because I had set a start date. And it wasn't the one. There were amazing performers, but there wasn't the one. And you always have to find the one, because castings have to work. So by accident, Sophie comes in for a general meeting practically. And right away when she walks through the door, I'm like, it's you. And I didn't know why, she was the one. I think it was her eyes maybe, but there was something about her. It was like she was a doll. And once I had her in, I could then combine it with Havana and Christine, who had been auditioning through the year, who were fantastic. But I couldn't choose them until I had chosen Elle, because she was going to carry the movie. And then with Charles, it was a little different because I was looking for an archetype that could was similar to Matt Mikkelsen and Ryan Gosling. And they aren't around a lot. So it's like finding a Greek statue in Hollywood. And so that was like another can of headaches. But it got solved because, so I have this deal with my youngest daughter. She used to like be a really cinephile, and we used to go to the movies, and she would see really, she would sit through like 2001 and stuff like that. Then Netflix came along, and then suddenly it was all these fucking shows. So I still try to teach her film history, but now it's a trade-off. Either I pay her, or I find it better that I'll sit through what you want to see, then you can sit through what I want to see. So, deal. She said, we're gonna watch Riverdale.
Oh, God.
7 seasons. And I said, okay, I can't do 7 seasons, honey, but I can do 1. It's like, I know which one, Dad. So, what's the one to take? Has anybody seen Riverdale?
Yeah.
Oh, obviously. So, it's the one that takes place in the 50s.
Yeah.
And it was a fantastic show, by the way. I did show my daughter Twin Peaks, where it all came from. But okay, we all steal, we're all thieves. So was David. Anyway, so on this television screen, Charles appears. I'm like, who's this guy? He had slick back hair. He looked like a 40s movie star. He wore leather. I was like, that is Private K. So I was like, how do I get him out of the television screen and into my movie? With Sophie, when I met her, my first question to make sure she was right for the movie was, what's your relationship with your father? She told me, I won't tell you, but she told me. And I said, what kind of music do you like? She told me, I said, great taste, so we can make it work. With Charles, I was like, do you want to be in this movie? He's like, absolutely, that's great. But I said, are you okay to wear topless? And he's like, I will take my clothes off anytime.
The right choice. Take some questions from the audience.
Your films are such visual experiences. I was curious, when you're brainstorming a project like this, do you start from a place of plot or theme, or do you start from a place of the visuals you want to see in a film?
I think because of my dyslexia, I always have to go with the visuals first, because that's what turns me on. I'm a voyeur in that sense. What would I like to see?
The questions, I can see your hand up a little bit. Oh, go ahead.
Yep.
I only asked this because I got a chance to see your personal print of the opening of Misty Beethoven, but in terms of like the melodrama that you present in here, do you like where do you go about like approaching the fantasia of this, like, I don't know what's heightened of this? I mean, is it like something more in the vein of like those early exploitation films, or like is it something else? Like, how much of is there Twin Peaks in this? Like,
Well, I think there's everything in it. It's everything that I like. It's like, I didn't want one thing, I wanted everything. When you're highly sensitive, you have sometimes difficulties not being able to choose. So my choice was everything. And I wouldn't leave everything. Anything that I desired had to be in it. And that was just my thing.
Your films are all very unique and don't fit sort of the pattern most producers or other people want to usually make. How do you get your funding to make such big passion projects or things that most normal studios wouldn't want to put their money behind usually?
I'm a very good used car salesman. And then you make your movies as cheap as possible. So there's a very simple chart if you want to survive in the entertainment industry. So as a director, which is the top of the list of everyone. If you we all want to make amazing movies and make a lot of money. That's like playing Russian roulette with 6 bullets. Yeah. So, if you make great films that don't lose money, you can survive, because there's always someone who's willing to give you some dough to walk on the red carpet. If you make an uninteresting film that makes a lot of money, no one really cares, because it ain't sexy and everyone wants sex. Or, you can make an amazing movie, but they lose money. That gets difficult to sustain, because eventually you'll run out of options. And then you can make a bad movie that loses money and do that once and you're out. But that's the chart of where you want to be. And obviously that's always the struggle. But thinking more like this, the less you ask, the more you can control.
Back on Al. Why did you want to name her after Elle Fanning?
Because Elle Fanning very much changed my whole ability. It was the first time that I made a film with a female lead. And I've always wanted to do that, but I always end up making films about violent men. So it was a big change for me, because it was a way my fantasy of what it's like being a 16-year-old girl. And so I felt Elle was always a name that's very means a lot.
We'll take one more. Go ahead.
First off, thank you for taking questions from the audience. It's not always an opportunity that we get. There were some motifs, some themes in the film, like observing, gazing, and I'm always curious to know from an artist how much of that is conscious and planned going into the work, and how much of that just emerges subliminally from the process of making it.
Well, it's a kind of a combination of both a desire and also what feels right at the moment. And then you just have to let it evolve. I shoot in chronological order so that I can always be able to change. I like stillness and I like silence because it's the foundation of faith. And in a way, it's something that is now have become the most provocative means in modern entertainment, because we're so used to shiny objects. And in a way, it's not healthy for our souls or for our minds. But stillness and silence is. So it's a form of inviting an opportunity to explore both what you're seeing, but also what you're feeling, which becomes now interactive experience. It's not like gaming, which obviously is a far more advanced opportunity creatively, but it's an emotional gaming, because you become not a spectator, you become involved. And to me, that then becomes the experience. But there are themes, of course, in the film that is both aggressive and passive, and that kind of duality is very interesting to me. There's the exploitation, which is a very male-y thing. The idea of a father being able to do extreme violence to protect innocence. It's a very male thing. It's like a fatherly porno in a way. It's like our release. It's pornography for men. So, but it's a form of special because it's justifiable in our inner desires to have a catharsis in violence, which is part of our nature. And there's that's very seductive. And so, that was part of also the aggressive, and then the passivity of obviously Elle's confusion of what she's falling into, but she's more of a voyeur until she becomes active.
Now that you're back in cinema, do we have you back for good? I know you're making a new movie.
I'm making Maniac Cop next year.
Woo!
In LA.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.